Welcome to our recorded panel discussion, Social Work, Structural Harm, and the Case for Reparative Justice. This is hosted by Incobra and Social Workers for Reparations. Thank you for joining us for what promises to be an important and timely conversation. This session invites us to critically examine how social work as a profession has intersected with systems of structural injustice, while also considering how social workers can contribute to advancing meaningful reparative justice through practice, policy advocacy, community engagement, and scholarship. We are especially honored to be joined by two distinguished speakers whose expertise and perspective will help guide this dialogue. I will invite each speaker to briefly introduce themselves, after which we will move into a conversation framed by several questions focused on accountability within the profession, concrete approaches to reparative justice, and the future of social work education and practice. At this time, I invite our sister, Dr. Kathy McElderry, to begin with a brief introduction, followed by Baba J, Dr. Onaji Muid.
Thank you, Dr. Jones. Just a little bit about me. I am a licensed social worker with over 20 years of experience in the academy. I have served as faculty, program coordinator, and chair at more than one university. My research interests focus on reparations, health disparities, and social determinants of well-being. And I'm honored to be in this space with you both.
Thank you, Dr. McElderry. Now we'll hear from Baba J, Dr. Onaji Muid.
Thank you so much. I'd like to, first of all, pour libation for the Creator and for our ancestors whose lines of genes we have come through. I'd like to pour libations for them and call on Callie House to be here, call on Queen Mother Moore to be here, call on Leonard Dunson to be here, call on Mario Badelli to be here, and Yusuf Clyde. And I better stop there. So I want to start off with that. I'm Dr. Onaji Muid, a student of our people and our struggle for liberation. And we'll say that something else may come up as we go forward, but I want to stop at that point. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks to both of you. To help frame our discussion, I will begin with the following question. How has social work historically contributed to or failed to challenge structural harm, and what does accountability look like for the profession today?
Well, I'll just start off with a document that I think is pretty important that addresses that issue. We don't have to use our imagination. In 2021, NASW issued a formal apology for its role in racism. The apology acknowledged that the profession has not lived up to its mission of social justice for Black people. And the statement also provided concrete examples of its racist involvement. This is not widely taught in social work programs, but the settlement houses that we like to talk about in our Practice One classes and our intro classes, many of those settlement houses were segregated during the progressive era. Social workers led that. Support for eugenics came from social work. And these are just some of the things that the document outlines that has been an injustice to Black people. Social workers also participated in recruiting Black men into the Tuskegee experiment. So there is a definite documented history of social work racism toward African American people. and there's no getting around it.
And I would like to add to that and bring people's attention to Gwendolyn Gilbert. I'm going to pour a libation for her. Ashe, Ashe, Ashe. She wrote in 1974. She wrote an article, the role of social work in Black liberation. In contrast to traditional concepts, a new model for social work practice was birthed as she talked about the context in which our people live. And she said she just defined it as neocolonialism, right? Or domestic colonialism. We are a nation within a nation. So if that is not the starting point of social work for people who've been traditionally oppressed, then by default it continues the oppression. When I went to grad school, I mean, the first, there was many instances of being just enraged, and one of them was when I found out that Social Security eliminated my male counterparts, family members in the South, and simultaneously eliminated the qualification of my great grandmother, Martha Davis, from getting Social Security because she was a maid in the North. I'm saying, how can you create a national policy that surgically removes the people that need it the most? So when you look at the profession of social work, basically it's a profession for of gatekeepers to give people just enough ability to survive so that they can go back into the workforce, they can pay taxes, and this succumb to their conditions of oppression. So the profession has categorically failed.
It continues to do so, I may add, Baba. Um, we continue in this profession to center social work as a white narrative. We have overlooked in the textbook many of the early African American social workers who were doing settlement house work when they were segregated. So our textbooks have not told the full story of this profession. Our origins continue to be rooted in a white narrative.
Thank you both. So you raised some very important points related to the question in discussing some of the historic structural harms, such as settlement houses, eugenics. You just recently raised the erasure of Black social workers' contributions to the profession. When we think about social work structural harms contemporarily, we can look at the juvenile justice system, the carceral systems. Those are examples that have been talked about. And so as we think about some of the points that you all raised as a follow-up, can you all think about what accountability looks like for the profession today? And as a side note to that, Baba raised a sister whose work looked at colonial practices. So what does decolonizing social work look like? Would that be a part of accountability within the profession? Do those two questions make sense?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I would think that in our training, in the courses that we are mandated to take, understanding human behavior in the social environment must live up to the intent. But it's not just the social environment. It's the economic environment. It's the cultural environment. It's the political environment. And certainly it is the historical environment. See, when we introduce historical environment, then of course those big issues come from the background to the foreground, which are what? Genocide and slavery. And when you do that, now you're talking human rights. So the accountability of the profession can only take place with a robust and unequivocal dedication to human rights. Without that commitment, we will stay inside of the rubric of civil rights, and we see where civil rights are heading at this point in time, right? We just how many voting rights have been decimated? How many the use of gerrymandering is taking place, right? So only when we move unequivocally and undeniably to human rights foundation of the profession will we get accountability. Without that, all we're doing is running around in circles.
An acknowledgement of how those human rights have been violated and what type of reparative measures are you going to take? That's the step we don't seem to be able to get to as a profession. Okay, yes, it happened, but now what? We cannot continue to do um, micro level practice when we're dealing with macro level problems. So that is what the profession has to reckon with. Social work has to broaden its perspective from individual focus to communities. This is about what was done to millions of people, the fact that racial injustice continues to exist, and we're not going to solve it on a micro level.
Well said. Well said. We're not going to solve macro problems with micro solutions. Well said. That is so accurate. In that, in addition with that is inviting more people to become members of the National Association of Black Social Workers. We know in 1968, when Black social workers attended the main white organization, association, professional organization at the time, whose name I don't recall, they walked out. They walked out because their voices weren't being heard, and they weren't looking at the community as a complete or a social organic whole. And formulated. But also in 1968, the Association of Black Psychologists, Psychologists also was formed, right? So we have to go back and look at those formations and how they have advanced. And both of those organizations, in fact, have created an African-centered approach to their uh, respective professions, which is basically the same thing, right? They just at different odds, but are saying the same thing. And as a result of that, we are clear that we can't use um, Eurocentric theories and practices to solve African-related problems that was created by those systems. Dr. Washington says if you place a cast on a broken bone without having knowledge of what the alignment of the bone in first instance, if you don't have that information, then whatever you put on the cast is going to exacerbate the problem. It's not going to solve the problem. And he says clinically, the same is true. If you don't know what the African consciousness was from its organic origins, whatever you do as far as therapy goes will not assist its healing because you don't even know what you're talking about or of what the norm is, right? We say, you use the word baseline, and that's true. So we are in the process of uh, rediscovering ourselves. We call that Sankofa, to go back and retrieve that which was lost. And our recovery process is to restore something that was lost, stolen, or given away. But not only in terms of substance use, but as a people, we're in this process of recovery and healing.
Thank you. It sounds like we've moved past simply raising what those structural harms are to speaking to ways that social workers can actually advance what you had first called decolonized practices through, for example.
Let me also add to that if I can. In COBRA, the National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations of America, have said there are at least 5 minimum harm areas. So it's good to have a framework of what these harm areas are before we talk about solutions. And I think that's where you want to go. And we say that our peoplehood and our nationhood has been harmed. That's one harm area. Our education is another harm area, which of course is miseducation. And we can reread Miseducation of the Negro by Carter G. Woodson in 1933. Right. The third is wealth and poverty. We know that we got here because they wanted to exploit our knowledge and our intelligence, our labor for the purpose of exploitation, right? And how we've been at the bottom of the society economically and remain there, right, economically. So wealth and poverty, right? The fourth one is the criminal punishment system. Dr. Shashi McIntyre wrote her dissertation on the criminalization of a race. We came here, we were brought here, and it was, in chains for the purpose of exploitation. That hasn't changed. And we know this because the 13th Amendment says what? We abolish involuntary servitude and slavery. Thank you. Except in the case of what? A punishment of a crime. And then the fifth area is health, which is our area. And we're going to talk more about that. So those five minimum areas are the basis to understand the harm. And that was my motivation of going back to social work school. I was a delegate at the United Nations World Conference Against Racism in Durban, South Africa in 2001. And I really knew at that point, even though I had been a substance abuse counselor for what, 20 years, for 14, about 14 years about that point. But I knew I didn't know enough about the harm. And that was my motivation to go back to school and acquire my master's. And my thesis was, in fact, Then I Lost My Spirit, an analytical essay on transgenerational trauma theory applied to two oppressed people of color nations. And I was looking at the Lakota nation, and I was looking at the New African nation. And those two people that I would have to, say are my mentors are Dr. Maria Yellowhorse Braveheart, Lakota woman, and Dr. Joy DeGruy, also. Both of them, PhD social workers, and their work has been on this question of historical trauma. So I knew I needed to go back and study, and that became the basis of my career that I've been doing since 2001, in fact. Well, I got my master's in 2004. So it's been, what's that, 25 years?
Mm-hmm. Thank you for raising in COBRA's 5 injury areas. On the Social Workers for Reparations website, we also have a framework for a reparation, and we have integrated those injury areas. And I'll repeat them just to make sure people know: peoplehood, education, criminal punishment, wealth, poverty, health. We've adopted those, and we also we lead with history, which I think is a through line to all of those, but we state that explicitly. So appreciate you providing that framework for acknowledging where those structural injustices have occurred. And you all had started, I think, moving into the direction of how we can start to what accountability looks like. And that was invoking reparative justice. It was invoking decolonized practices or decolonized social work. You mentioned African-centered social work. So can you two speak a little bit more specifically about what actively advancing, in particular, reparative justice looks like in the daily practice, policy work, and or research of social workers?
Well, I'll just say very quickly, um, in NASW Code of Ethics, it mandates that social workers engage in political and social action. And I think it's very important that we understand that we have a responsibility to advocate for structural change. It's not enough just to um, think of discrimination, racism, and white supremacy as something that happens on a one-on-one basis. We know that it is systemic, and we're going to have to take the proper steps to dismantle an unfair and unjust system. We have some beautiful documents in social work. We have some beautiful mandates, some beautiful calls to action, but we're not living up to that. We're stopping short of developing um, a macro focus to bring about structural change. In addition to issuing a formal apology, NASW also wrote a document called Undoing Racism Through Social Work. And that document stops short of, to me, putting some backbones to it. What are you going to do? This is a profession that still has not taken a position on reparations, HR 40. These are things that the profession needs to be looking at as policy issues. And how can they join the political fight to get these bills through and to begin to take a serious look at how social work can play a significant role in reparations? So, if we follow the code of ethics, do the things that we say we want to do as a profession, that this is our mission, this is what we want to do, then the roadmap is there. We just need to put the doing behind it. Um, Social workers are very much focused on policy. And to not include HR 40 in many of our textbooks is a major oversight. Um, Not to include it in the curriculum, I think, is a major oversight. We produce research that shapes policy, and we need to be talking about this far more than what we're doing in the profession.
Mm. I often reference Mari Evans, Black woman, and pour a libation for her. Mari Evans, Ashe, Ashe, Ashe. And in her article, I think it's called Colonialism, the Nature of Colonialism and Creativity. And she says that if you make a people mystified, dependent, what's the third one? Third one is I would say self-effacing. And it's not exactly that, but that's what I come up with. That's the only thing my brain is giving me right now. And the last one is powerless, right? So accountability for us is being clear about what we want, right? Using the principle of, we talk about agency, we talk about self-determination. We have to be clear, right, about the demystification, right? What education do we need, right? We kind of got into that. The second level, how do we move from dependency to self-reliance? How do we move from self-effacing to self-affirmation? And how do we move from powerless to self-determination? We have to be clear, right? We should not hold the profession accountable without first holding ourselves accountable. We have to know what we want. We have to develop an ideology that, in fact, expresses our aspirations and our future. And of course, that's the one thing that they had to negate and therefore wage war against the leaders who helped us to formulate that thinking. So we can't talk about social work without talking about the COINTEL program, the counterintelligence program that was created by Hoover, right? we can't talk about the external forces that have been put in place intentionally, scientifically, to maintain that a so-called Black Messiah would not arise. So all of our leaders who somehow might have fit that particular function have been targeted for first character assassination, for financial assassination, and finally assassination. So we must understand that for us, the social work that we need is a social work of liberation, and we will continue to bring that forward. I'll give reference to Faye's piggyback. Uh, I was a substance abuse counselor there, and we went about the process of redefining who we were and what we did. We didn't say we did drug treatment. We changed that. We said we're doing resocialization to create an empowered individual mentally, physically, and spiritually. And we didn't call them clients. We called them strivers, right? And then when they graduated from the acute treatment process, we call them achievers. But the thing that made it, I think, really so different is that our model was total community involvement, and that got translated into a village approach to treatment. And that's very consistent with Ubuntu. Not I am because we are, therefore I am. No, that's not it. Ubuntu is the person becomes a person through other people. So even though we didn't have that terminology at that point, instinctively we knew that the healing of our people would occur in a village context. So holding the profession accountable starts with holding ourselves accountable and being clear about these steps, right? The steps of education, the steps of self-determination, the steps of self-affirmation, and the steps of self-determination. And when we have that as the rubric in which we are then holding ourselves accountable, then we can hold the external realities accountable, but it starts with us first.
Can you elaborate a little bit further on who us constitutes? Social work is a body of people. So when you say us, who are you referring to?
That's a very good question. So, so when I say us, I am talking about those melanated persons who understand that social work is not just helping someone, but social work has to be a profession of liberating not someone, but someone's. So the us I'm speaking about is anyone who has a real commitment to humanity, that they want to see a change. There was an article was written that um, social work can be better than this, right? There's something better than what we have, if I'm not saying it right. So the us is all human beings who, not just melanated, but human beings who have a social conscience and have a social commitment. And you mentioned racism. I would talk about bringing to the conversation um, the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond. They've been teaching undoing racism for, I don't know, close to 50 years now, anyway, between 40 to 50 years, of which I've been an organizer. So we do have different instruments, modalities, interventions that have been growing, over a number of years. It's bringing those interventions into the academy that will create another generation of social conscious social workers. Very good question to us. Now, there's a brother ancestor, Chokwe Lumumba, and he said, going back to Black people, African people, he said that we have, I think, he said, what, four choices? We have a choice to stay here and try to make a multicultural nation, right? And many of us choose to do that, and that's a choice that one can make. Um, and those say, well, we'll stay here and we'll have our own country, right? The Republic of New Africa. And then you have those who choose to migrate, repatriate, right? That could go back to Africa or repatriate any place else. I mean, really, those are the four choices we have, right? What I try to emphasize is any group of those four that one chooses themselves to be, each one of those groups has to say the other group has a right to make that choice, right? In political terms, they call that consociated democracy. Um, until we get to that point, we're going to see ourselves as uh, enemies or at least adversaries of one another and not really striving for the same thing. We have to extend that right to each of those political different ideologies inside the Black community in order to finally get to the point of strength that we can make demands. See, Douglas said that power never, conceded without a demand. It never did. It never will. It may be a moral struggle. It may be a physical struggle, but it must be a struggle because where there is no struggle, there is no progress. And that progress is in umoja, unity, to strive for maintaining unity in the family, community, nation, and race, right? The seven principles of Kwanzaa gives us a blueprint. It's not all of it, but it's a very good start. But we start with Umoja, but that Umoja is having mutual respect for the different choices, the ideological choices that we make. So that's the we in terms of the Black community. But the we is more than that. The we is humans, and now we're talking about social workers who want to make the profession a profession that serves humanity.
Yes, and lives up to its mandates.
Thank you both
Yes.
for that. I want to make sure our audience hears the name Mari, Mari Evans. And the essay that Baba has referred to is How We Speak the Colonized Voice, Resistance Singing in Many Keys. So, as we kind of move toward a close, I would like to hear from you both about social work education, and particularly around HR 40, because Dr. McElderry, our sister, had mentioned that. So, how do you, because you had mentioned HR 40 as we talked a little about social workers. So, how do you all see social work education perhaps better preparing practitioners to address structural harms, engage in reparative work, particularly thinking through it through HR 40? And then do you mind explaining to folks what HR 40 is? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I can start with that. HR 40 was first introduced in 1989 to seek and establish a commission that was really a study commission. But over the years, it's developed into not only a study commission, but a commission that would have teeth in it in terms of bringing forth reparations. So we have to celebrate and we have to continue to um, foster and support HR 40. But I have to say that that would be insufficient. A reason being that that HR 40 will only be acknowledged to the extent that the international reparations movement becomes stronger. And that strength, that organizing in a sense was culminated at a certain point in 2001 at the World Conference Against Racism in Durban, South Africa. 25 years later, what we see is the declaration that was put forth in the United Nations that said human trafficking of enslaved Africans and chattel slavery was the gravest crime against humanity. That passed back in, I think it was in February, March, that just passed, right? So we can't be uh, only looking at what's happening here locally. We must connect that to the international reparations movement, and that strengthens the international movement, and vice versa. The international movement strengthens us. So yes, HR 40 and this new declaration. Now, we must appreciate the language. We have moved from transatlantic slave trade, which was certainly a misnomer, wasn't a trade, right? Um, And it wasn't just slaves. We didn't define that for ourselves. That was a name that was put upon us. So now we're talking about human trafficking, which is what it really was, and we're talking about enslaved Africans. So we're starting to change the wording and the definition. And when we do that, we change meaning, we change meaning, we change worldview. Once we change worldview, then we change people's ability of themselves to carry this liberation struggle forward. So we're at a time now that we're not going to use the transatlantic slave trade language any longer. We're going to talk about what it was. It was human trafficking. So, yes, again, must struggle wherever we are, right? As they say, we'll think internationally, but act locally, right? We'll act locally since we're here now, but make sure that we always connected to the international reparations movement. There is a movement by the December 12th movement that was the leaders of what was called Durban 400. We had 400 people and organizations in South Africa, and now they're going to celebrate the continuation of that movement on August the 30th, and they're bringing people together in all kind of ways. We'll make that information available to you, Sister Nikki, so people can start to participate and organize with that. And if I will, if I can also say to invite our audience to go back and look at those recordings on your website, that when we declared Social Work Reparations Day on March the 28th, right? And that was done because in 2004, Sister Nikki, you had created a panel then looking at reparatory justice, looking at reparations, looking at social work. So we wanted to honor that seminal panel that you created, and then that's why we used that day, March 28th, and then of course we extended the campaign to June the 12th, which was another panel that I happened to be on as well, and there we had our ancestor Lyndon Dunstan, Ashe, Ashe, Asheo, who was a social worker. He was the board member of NCOBRA. And we also had, at that time, the president of the National Association of Black Social Workers, Melissa Smith. And that's the campaign, right? March 28th to June the 12th. So we're inviting all of you to go back and watch those interviews and on the website. That can be found on the website. And I'm sure Nikki will post that website so people can have access to it. Thank you so much. I know that was long-winded, but I wanted to get there before I forgot, and then I would have been mad at myself afterwards. So I'm trying to at least not make myself mad at myself because I didn't say what I think was really essential. So this is a campaign. This is not an event, it's a campaign. And even after June the 12th, we're going to continue to move forward in terms of what is our reparations agenda moving forward. Thank you.
Well, not much I can add to that. I agree totally that this issue is a global phenomenon. We cannot solve racism just here in the United States. It's a global issue everywhere. Slavery was a global issue. Um, but social work also has an international presence, and we need to understand and utilize the tools that have been put in place for us to move forward as a profession. We have to put pressure on the profession to do what it says it's going to do. And social workers are over 700,000 uh, professional social workers in this country. That can be a powerful voice for moving some of this legislation forward here in the United States. And in the global context, different countries, the issue plays out differently. But we definitely have an international presence that could be utilized to fight for the dismantling of racism all over the globe. Um, so it's very important that we learn the language. I think it is critical that institutions of higher education, social work programs begin to invoke reparation literacy into the curriculum. If we cannot talk about this in a concrete and literate manner, then we're just perpetuating the myths and the misinformation that's out there. And we don't want to do that. As a profession whose mission is social justice, we need to be visible doing the work of social justice. And no other people have been so dehumanized as African Americans in this country. The legacy of slavery continues to play out daily in terms of the disparities that we see in all of the injury areas that Baba mentioned. So, for healing to take place, for social work to live up to its true mission, then it needs to be about doing the work of bringing about social justice. If
Thank you.
that's not what you're about, don't say that's what you're about, but be about what you say you're about. And that's where I hold the profession accountable. Yes, we have work to do as a melanated people, but that's our business. We'll handle our business. But as a profession, we got to be about the business of holding these people accountable who set policy, who um, mandate the EPAWS. This is what students are supposed to gather from their training. People are paying lots of money to go and get this training. And if it's just to do business as usual, then you're wasting a lot of folks' time.
Mm, mm.
So, with that, certainly we must bring into the conversation that the audience may not know about is called the grand challenges of social work, right?
Yes.
Um, they speak to, I think, three categories: individual and family well-being. It's about four subsections of that. Stronger social fabric is about five subsections of that, and then they have the last one, just society, and in that, eliminate racism. In fact, I wrote a chapter with other colleagues um, addressing that particular subsection. In that is also promote smart decarceration, build financial capability and assets for all, and reduce extreme economic inequality and achieve equal opportunity and justice, which my dissertation was actually looking at. But in all that body, right, I don't recall ever seeing any discussion of reparations. I mean, maybe,
Discussion.
I haven't been following it, meticulously, so I can't say it's not there. I just said I haven't seen it, but
It's
and
not there.
okay,
See,
so
that's what there's a growing body, small but growing body of literature that addresses social work and reparations. And that's one of the things that that body of literature has been calling for social work to end its silence and take a position on reparation. So far, NABSW is the only major social work organization that has stated a position on reparations. So CSWE has been silent, NASW has been silent. These organizations could be powerful tool houses to put this agenda forward.
yes, internationally, when we think of most of the literature in international human rights law speaks about uh, compensation, uh, restitution, um, rehabilitation, satisfaction, and I seem to be leaving one out. But I think our charge, of course, we take a little bit of all of it, but I think our major charge as social work is that area of rehabilitation. Um, and this is what we have to create. We have to create what does that look like for us? Uh, and that means we have to liberate our imagination, right? Part of colonialism is to usurp people's ability to think and to be creative. And long as you can keep people confined to a definition of themselves, which is small and boxed in and corralled, then they'll live a life similarly. So the liberation process is to liberate our minds and thinking about what it is that we deserve as a people. And I'll go back to 1865 when Tecumseh Sherman met with around 29, 30 preachers in South Carolina, Georgia. And the first thing they said is land. They said, we want land. And that became what is called Special Order 15. They said, we want land and we want the Union Army to protect us on land. And of course, we remember that stayed in place. And many people didn't get the 40 acres and mule, but that stayed in place until the Tilden-Hayes Compromise in 1877, right? The whole thing about the Republicans and the Democrats and who would be the president. So, and the Democrats said, I'll give you the presidency, but remove these troops. And that's when the KKK was created. That's when we experienced another level of terror that we hadn't even seen before, because now we weren't slaves or enslaved. We weren't property of someone else. So it's like, okay, I can just replace you, right? So now we have the prison industrial complex coming into being. We have convict leasing coming into existence, right? So, but the first thing they said is land, right? We want land, we want protection. And then we saw the erosion of that. So we have to go back and honor our people who fought for these things. We have to honor Callie House. We have to honor Queen Mother Moore, Dorothy Lewis, all these people who have given us the blueprint. Is really it isn't we don't really need anything right now other than how do we take this curriculum from our people and make sure that it's in our churches, it's in our mosques, it's in our synagogues, it's in our community centers. How do we take this body of knowledge that we have created and make sure that our people have that? That is the liberation of the people, when the people have their own mind, their own vision, and their own future for themselves.
Thank you. That's amazing, Ashe. Thank you both for sharing your insights, experiences, and reflections during this important conversation. Today's discussion, where you raise important points around assessment and acknowledging of structural harms, accountability and reparative justice, a global outlook and practice with regard to reparative justice and reparations literacy. And also the website is SW, the number 4, reparations.org have really been important and had us thinking critically about the role of social work in confronting harm, structural harm, systemic injustices, as well as reparations. You've also expanded our imagination around the possibilities of reparative justice within our profession, our institution, and our communities. So we're so grateful for your contributions and for helping move this conversation forward in meaningful ways. Take good care.
Thank you.
I have to say,